Okay, well, good morning. I'm Paul Markle, Executive Director of the Barrie Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to thank you for joining the Barrie Chamber today for this session on employer resources available through the Métis Nation of Ontario. So one of the key objectives of the Métis Nation of Ontario, or MNO, is to encourage academic and skills development and enable citizens of the Métis Nation to attain their educational aspirations. So in pursuit of this goal, the MNO began offering training initiatives in 1996 with funding from the Métis Human Resources Development Agreement. And since that time, the MNO has built a comprehensive infrastructure to deliver employment and training opportunities to qualified Métis candidates. Critical to the development of this high quality programming is partnerships with businesses and organizations to offer real world experience on the job. There are many benefits to employers engaging the services of MNO branch offices in hiring their qualified candidates. Your business may be eligible for wage subsidies. You can access candidates trained specifically for your work site, and you can encourage a richer, more diverse and inclusive workforce. Our expert today will walk you through or talk to you about how your business can get connected with this program and start accessing these resources. So I'll introduce our expert in a moment for the presentation, after which we're going to go right to the Q&A. To submit a question, please use the Q&A button rather than the chat within your Zoom platform, and type your question, and I'll read the questions and direct them to the expert for a response. So the Q&A is at the bottom of your screen. Again, if you put stuff in chat, we're going to look at it, but we may not necessarily get to it first. We also have this going on Facebook Live, and we'll do our best to move those questions over if we can, but they don't show up on our platform while we're doing the presentation. So with us today is Patricia Graham, who works for the Métis Nation of Ontario in their education and training branch as an employment developer for Region 7. She holds a social service worker with honors diploma from Georgian College and is a proud Métis citizen with Métis Nation of Ontario. Her main roles and responsibilities as an employment developer is to assist Métis people in their employment and training goals through the case managing and educational endeavors, and working closely with community business and organizations to develop opportunities for employment and to continue growing successful Métis labor market. So organizations like the Chamber, I guess, would be one of those ones that you try to work with. So proud to have you as a Chamber member, and we're really excited to listen to your presentation today. We were just having a bit of back and forth before we got started, and I was saying to Patricia that I firsthand knowledge of a business in Barrie that has had great success in working with the MNO, and I'm excited to let the rest of our organization know about some of those great services that are out there. So I'm going to turn my camera off because no one wants to look at me. And Patricia, take it away.
Thank you, Paul, and everyone at the Chamber for allowing me this platform to provide the information on our programs and services. Again, we are across the entire province of Ontario, and in 1993, the MNO was established through the will of the Métis people and Métis communities coming together throughout Ontario to create a Métis-specific governance structure. With 1 in every 4 Métis in Ontario under the age of 14, the MNO is poised to play an even more significant role in the development and delivery of education and training programs in the years to come. The MNO and its many partners, including the province of Ontario and the Government of Canada, recognize the potential for this growing population of young Métis to play a key role in creating a healthier and more prosperous Ontario. The potential can only be realized if young Métis people have access to the best skills, training, and education available, which is what the MNO strives to provide. The MNO offers a variety of employment programs and training to qualified Métis candidates, and these include our successful labor market programs, which have grown significantly in the past several years. So I'm just going to jump into our PowerPoint presentation. Okay. So again, welcome everyone. It is a great pleasure to be here with you. My name is Patricia Graham, and I'm the employment developer with the Métis Nation of Ontario. And again, my main roles and responsibilities is to assist Métis people in their employment and training goals through case managing their educational endeavors and working closely with community businesses and organizations to develop opportunities for employment and contribute to a growing and successful Métis labor market. We are located for the Barrie office in Cedar Point, and we also have regional offices in Midland as well as Gravenhurst for the Region 7, which covers Simcoe, Muskoka, Grey Bruce, down to Newmarket, and we border over at Peterborough for Region 7. Part of our statement of prime purpose, again, is to encourage academic and skills development and enable Métis people to attain their educational aspirations. Our programs and services are financed through the Indigenous Skills and Employment and Training Strategy, which is funded by the Government of Canada. And here would be a list of all the training programs, but for today's event, we're going to be focusing and starting on the programs that are geared to job seekers who are currently unemployed, underemployed, or at risk of losing employment. I would also like to mention that these programs are available to those who hold citizenship in the MNO, as well as those who self-identify. So for employers looking to utilize the wage subsidy programs, the youth program, job creation, job shadowing, disability support programs, any of those programs that are the labor market side, they do not have to be Métis as the business. It's the clients in which we're supporting. So the biggest one for an employer would be the wage subsidy program. And this looks at reimbursing a portion of the employee's wage, and it can include additional training, supplies needed for the job, any overhead costs. This can be utilized up to 1 year. And again, it's to support the hiring and training of Métis employees with the goal that they maintain full-time employment once our wage subsidy has ended. The wage subsidy would be negotiated between myself and the employer based on current labor market needs and demands, as well as what the client's needs based is. Added to the wage subsidy program, we have the summer career placement program, and this looks at how we can support students who are returning to school or who have recently just graduated. We're looking at supporting cost of their wage. They need to work between 20 and 37.5 hours a week. Employers must have the payroll capabilities, and we would like that the employment be related to their field of study or what they could just completed their schooling in. We have a Métis employability program, and this looks at supporting the removal of barriers to employment, such as increasing job readiness and literacy skills, or academic upgrading. This could be supplies also related to support employment. So if an offer of employment is given to a Métis client and there is clothing, tools, equipment that is needed for them to do their job that is not provided by the employer, we look at how we can support the cost of that purchase with a letter of employment. This program also looks at how we can support our clients in obtaining their G license drive test, paying for the cost of a record suspension, CPR first aid courses. It also looks at how we can look at potentially paying for a bus pass for a set period of time in order for the client to be able to get some income coming in and still be able to support their families. We have a disability support program, and this looks at providing persons with disabilities the assistance to complete training or prepare for and secure employment. This looks at covering the cost of additional training that individual may need, special equipment, devices, or any tutoring, as well as transportation and associated fees with assessments. That would be what we would cover under the disability support program. We also have a self-employment program, and this program looks at how we could support the areas of skill training, business plan development, as well as implementation. The Métis individual can be co-owner, but they have to own at least 50% of the business, and that individual must be able to make a minimum 25% investment into the company. This would look at how we could support the cost of a living allowance for the Métis client for a set period of time while the business is also in its infancy stage. Another great program that we have is our mobility assistance program. And what this looks at doing is funding the cost of travel related to our Métis client who is relocating to a secured job in another area. This can be as simple as moving from Barrie to Gravenhurst, or it could be Barrie to Ottawa. It could be Ottawa to Barrie. So it doesn't mean that the individual needs to be residing in the Simcoe County area. If an offer of employment is given to a Métis candidate and they need to relocate, we look at how we can support that cost. It's a maximum funding up to $2,000, and it looks at, again, the meals, transportation, and any accommodations while they may be in transit. We have the special project funding. It is currently the Indigenous Women in the Trades. It was set to end this fiscal, so it would have been March 31st, 2021. We have received an extension, so we are extremely happy about this. And what this project and program funding looks at doing is supporting all Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, with a focus on women who wish to pursue their career in the skilled trades. This looks at covering eligible expenses such as tuition, books, supplies, safety equipment, living allowances, dependent care, travel, and employer wage subsidies. So again, this would be the only program delivered through the MNO that extends to First Nations and Inuit. The Métis Nation also has a job creation program which supports the development of employment opportunities to assist the community and local economy. This looks at how we can support a job being created for the Métis individual. They can't be replacing someone who's laid off or on maternity leave. It can't be a restructuring position. This would be creating a job, a position specifically for this individual. And we look at how we can support that. We have a job shadowing program, and this is really similar to your co-op placements. And we understand that it can be difficult and trying sometimes with regulations around liability insurances and just having someone come in and just shadow, but we do like to connect with potential labor market related employers of what our clients are looking for, just to talk to them and let them know what it's like before they go and invest, whether it's education or looking at purchasing equipment needed to do this job. We want them to be able to see what they're getting into. To complement the labor market funding programs that I just mentioned, we also have supports for those who wish to continue their education, and we have this through a number of programs. The biggest one would be our Métis Training Purchase Program, and this looks at funding expenses related to the cost of their education. This can include, again, the tuition, the textbooks, related supplies, exams, any certification fees, transportation, childcare, and a living allowance are eligible. The training must be provided and delivered through an accredited training institution. And it's your standard typical 2-year, 64-week diploma that is eligible. We also have a program that is designed for apprenticeships. And this looks at how we can support potential apprentices or apprentices through funding their in-class training, as well as the books, transportation, and again, a living allowance, and any fees that are related to the MTCU apprenticeship registration fees. And then we look at how we can support the employer through a wage subsidy when they return to work. We have a program designed for Métis youth that are ages 15 to 20 who are in high school and who are currently facing barriers which are negatively impacting their chances of graduating. We look at how we could support the cost of tutoring, cognitive testing, travel, childcare, and participation in extracurricular school-related activities. So essentially, we want to look at the barrier and how we can remove that barrier and make them at risk to successful graduation. And another key focus of the Métis Nation of Ontario education training is to promote sharing of traditional Métis knowledge, heritage, and way of life. We do this through our summer youth cultural program. The Métis Nation of Ontario also hires youth for the summer, and their job is to go out and support and promote our culture, our way of life, and traditions. We have a way of life program, initiatives and activities to support intergenerational transference of our traditional Métis knowledge. Sorry, gotta go back. So how we do that is we also have a grant, and this is a one-time up to $5,000, and it is the Métis Culture-Based Development Grant. And this looks at supporting self-determination in an arts and culture-related career. Some examples of this have been the Métis Nation of Ontario purchasing books by Métis authors. One was self-published and the other was through a publishing company. And we look at how we contributed to purchasing the books for them to sell. We've supported purchasing film equipment for documentaries and short films produced by Métis filmmakers, as well as an online Indigenous retail store where Métis and other Indigenous artists can sell their creations. And I just want to come back and speak to the education piece a little bit. So the MNO is pleased to offer the post-secondary education support program. This program is for those who hold citizenship in the MNO. And these citizens can now apply to receive funding to access post-secondary education for those programs which would not fall under your 2-year 64-week college. So this would be looking at those 3-year programs at college. This would be looking at your bachelor's, your master's, and your doctorate level education. It would be an application process as well, but we do now have the potential to support our citizens at that higher level education. The MNO also offers a student bursary program, and this is available at 42 institutions. And as of 2019, we've provided 1,235 students with a combined total of $457,000. These are in the form of bursaries, and there are also several college-specific bursaries, and local community councils within the MNO also offer bursaries and awards to our registered MNO citizens. So in very specifically, your local community council would be the Barrie South Simcoe Métis Council, and they're located out of our office in Cedar Point. Again, pre-COVID, they would be there, and now the best way to reach them would be through their Facebook or email account. And those would be a connection for cultural awareness, and just information seeking would be through our council. So that would be the presentation. So thank you, Marcy and Miigwech, and I will stop sharing screen. Okay.
Oh, hang on. I got to get my my view going here. 1 second here. Sorry. Show self view. There we go. Sorry, I shut myself off. That was really interesting. I was madly writing notes.
It is a lot of information, so
Yeah.
I'd be more than happy to connect again one-on-one with anyone who wants it, or just specifically honing on a program. But like I said, through the education training branch, we have the labor market and then our training side. But we always promote both. It could be utilized from an individual going to school that we're supporting, and then we support a summer wage subsidy, and then they return to school, and we support the second year, and then they graduate, and we support a wage subsidy. So our clients don't just pick one program. We support from the very beginning of their endeavors, educational and working.
Right.
And we've grown. We have an early learning childcare now. So we have within the MNO as a whole, we support kindergarten all the way up, like I said, if you're a citizen, to your doctorate level education, if that's what you need.
Yeah, it's amazing. The level of support is incredible. I mean, as I was sort of listening through it, I was kind of wishing I was a Métis, which led to a couple of really stupid questions, which I'm going to ask because you may as well, right? I mean, I'm pretty good at them in general. But the first question is: so you talked a lot about these things being available to Métis citizens as well as to Inuit. What can you describe what that means? I mean, how do you become a Métis citizen? Obviously, culturally, you have to have some background, but
Yeah.
start there and then sort of work our way out. If you would.
So in Canada, we have 3 Indigenous groups. You have First Nations, Métis, and Inuit.
Right.
As the MNO, collectively, we support the Métis, and the Métis people are, we're here as, you know, a mix of First Nation and European.
Yeah.
So to become a citizen in the MNO, you have to prove that lineage and that heritage.
Right.
And we understand for various reasons, not everybody would have access to that information, but they, you know, through storytelling, they just know that they've had a grandmother or a great-grandmother or a great-great-grandmother who was First Nations and married a non-First Nations. But they just can't prove it on paper. So that's why we continue to support those who are self-declaring or self-identifying as
Self-identifying. Okay, good. So
Yeah, so the ISETS program, so all of them, but that university kind of level or 3-4 year college diplomas, all of the other ones are available to those who still self-identify, as well as those who hold citizenship. That would not hinder their
Right,
application for funding if an employer was to offer employment and they say, hey, I know I'm AT, I just don't have the card, I'm not a citizen. We still look at how we can support that.
right, right. And maybe even, spend some time sort of, figuring out that heritage.
Mhm.
Different ways of finding and accessing information, and maybe able to shed some light on whatever your background is, which is kind of interesting. I knew the answer to that question. I just thought it was important that we ask it because there's so many people that really don't understand the differences. So these programs are available to Métis and Inuit, but not necessarily available to First Nations.
They're not available to Inuit. The
Or to
only
Inuit.
program that we have would be our employment and energy program. So that's that skill trade based through education and labor market. So it needs to be a skill trade that we can relate to the energy sector.
Right,
That was special project funding, and that would be available to all Indigenous groups. But any other program is a Métis specific program.
right.
Now, again, if someone were to come to me and disclose that they're not Métis, they're Inuit, say, we would then still support them with soft services in terms of resume and connecting. And if an employer did need to look at how they may need a wage subsidy, then we would support that referral over to the Georgian Bay or the Barrie Native Friendship Center and see what kind of programs they have available to support their Indigenous populations.
Right. Yeah. So you work collaboratively to make sure that there are supports for, our Indigenous peoples, regardless of what, the area they may fall under, kind of thing. I
Yeah.
think it's an important distinction. And, it's funny. I watched, and just kind of got hooked on that. There was a series called First Contact, which for me was a huge eye opener about, people that just didn't realize that they had any connection to it. The loss of the culture, the loss of the language, all those things that went in, and the bias that sort of comes along with it. So I think the access to the funding here is super important. So let's talk a little bit about a couple of things that sort of came up. One of them was you talked about a self-employment program.
Mhm.
Do you have any examples of what a business looks like that? Or is there anything locally that's happened that we could refer to say, here's how what it looks like? I
So
get
locally,
yeah,
yeah, not in Barrie. I'm currently case managing one from Bancroft. I'm supporting my colleagues out that way.
okay,
So we do have a client who has started her own business in the dental hygienist. She's a dental hygienist. So we've looked at how we support the cost of some of her advertisements. So we've paid for her advertising.
right,
We've paid for additional PPE due to COVID. We purchased that, and then again, while that business is getting up and going, we've provided her a small living allowance. You can't live off it. It's tabled by the government, but it's based on our table, and it's whether you're single, married, or with children. That amount varies.
sure,
So we've supported that. And what we'll do is we'll put our request in for the entire year, which is the maximum duration of the funding, and we evaluate it every 3 months. So she could come to me and say, business is booming. I don't need any more money to live. I don't need a paycheck from you guys, so to speak.
yeah,
But I still would like support with, our PPE. COVID's through the roof. Like their budget went up like $15,000 for equipment. So we looked at how we could support a portion or all that's again between me and the employer, which would have been my client at that point. So we can remove parts of a contract as needed, and we always go in for the maximum. So,
yeah,
and if an employer comes and says, there may be some training that I don't know if I can cover, or it's going to be extremely beneficial in their role or the potential for them to grow, let's have that conversation at the beginning and build it into the contract.
yeah,
So we're not hit with any surprises after the fact. Just to speak, Paul, to our contract application, I don't make the decision. What happens is we gather the information, we have these discussions, and it goes to my community for approval. And once I get the number of approvals that I need back from my community, I then send it off to my head office just to make sure that I haven't missed anything and that
sure,
there's still dollars left in that budget. So really it's our community who looks at it and approves it with a final overlook from head office to make sure everything's okay and it still meets with our guidelines. And then, it's about a 10-day process from start to finish to have an answer, whether you're going to school or you want a wage subsidy.
Yeah.
And we can, I have fast tracked that, to within 3 days. Like they want to start now, and it just came across my desk. So, but we typically say we like to give ourselves about 10 days.
I mean, it's still, to be honest with you, the way that typical government works, that's lightning fast. So, but I really like the fact that it's sort of customized. You're dealing with people on an individual basis. It's not just fill an application out or whatever. I mean, and I would imagine that your success rate is probably amplified because of that customized approach to it at the beginning and not wasting time and or resources down the line. It leaves more in the pot for everybody, I guess, is one way of looking at it.
Yeah, for sure.
Very cool. Very, very, very interesting. And nice to see that, a business, any business, regardless of whether you're, when you're starting it, cash flow is always a problem. So that hand up is extremely important to success rate, I think, in the long run, to making sure that they're stable.
Well, and even through that, like we can't directly invest in the business, but if we have, a partnership and one of our clients, they're Métis, obviously, and they're a partner, we also would refer them to the Métis Voyager Development Fund. And that's a lending institution for Métis business owners, and they do their own assessment and intakes, but they're an institution that provides some of those grants based on whatever their application and processes are. So there is still a funding stream available to Métis businesses that are still culturally, aware and take into account these different needs, but it is a lending institution as well. But that's something then that we refer to when they're looking for that cash flow, or they want money to purchase equipment. I can only support what is needed to sustain the business, and it can't be more than a year old. So again, with COVID, we've been able to look at that funding wording, which is how I can then build in that PPE, that equipment. Yes, you would need to do your job regularly, so I couldn't invest in that. But the need to sustain it now, your budget has grown huge because of COVID. So we look at how we can support that.
No, it's great. And in repurposing, the jobs have lost, some have been created. I mean, I think it's great. It's great supports. And typically I wish there was more of it in the regular marketplace, to be honest with you. So you talked about a couple things, the wage subsidy, and again, I'm putting a comment in here, but it being individualized. Does that start to get mixed up with the federal wage subsidy program, or is this separate and aside? Is there a potential for double dip in there, or is it one or the other kind of thing?
You can't utilize our wage subsidy and any summer career grants or any other wage subsidies.
Right.
What would happen in the event that, let's say, someone is wanting to sign on that apprentice? We wouldn't start a contract if we know that you've applied for the $1,000 sign on. We would look at how we can support it after that date has come and gone, because we don't want to jeopardize your funding. And again, our funding is a federal ISETS complete across the board. It's an ISETS program. It comes, I think we have a 10-year commitment. We're on year 2 or 3, so we would never jeopardize that by no means. So we have those conversations. Have you applied for anything else? Are you currently in receipt of anything else? It doesn't mean that a business can't utilize a program. So if the business has utilized the summer grant program, and they still want to continue with that person after the summer, we could support a wage subsidy the day after the first funding program ends. Like, it can't be simultaneously, it can be right after, though. And then I would have that conversation with the employer to say, okay, so you've utilized it for 3 months right now through the government. What do you foresee the change being if we go a year, if we go 6 months, if we go 3 months? Again, we want to see that once the wage subsidy has ended, that employment continues, or we're going to see a revolving door, whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, of people out of work. Our focus is on, again, the Indigenous. The numbers of Indigenous people who are employed and gainfully employed is low. Those who make those who hold decision-making positions are low. And then those of women, Indigenous women employed, they're low. So our goal is, we don't want them to remain at entry level, unless that's what they choose to want to do. We want to continue and have that growth. And the perspective, that Indigenous perspective within those decision-making roles as well. So we would have those conversations. And like I said, we'd evaluate as we go. We could ask for a year, and your wage subsidy might be a little bit less.
Right.
If you want to go 6 months, then we could, I'd still have that the total dollar figure in mind based on what that current rate of pay would be for a person in that position. And it's just, how much are we going to contribute? Do you want it for the year? Do you want it for 6 months? If you want it for 6 months, then we can give you a little bit more. If a year, we're going to spread it out a little bit too, and see where else we can pull in some of those new certificates or additional training to still make you extremely valuable to that company, and stay within that company.
Yeah. So I think it's important that people have that connection point with you, and they do some planning, make this a long-term kind of a commitment, because you may want to pick and choose a course for your business that, in some cases it may be the short-term subsidy that makes sense, or the long-term, and you don't want to jeopardize the funding from one or the other because of a wrong decision. So if you're in a trade kind of thing, the apprentice, the advantage of being able to have tools supplied, and I mean, the goal of a long-term position is highly increased, I think, with some forethought and some planning and a good relationship with you guys. So
and we do support those roles that would offer those transferable soft skills, which are now power skills. Like everyone going to remote and COVID, the computer skills, the social media skills, those are just, what kids today have is kind of what's needed now. So if they know that after 6 months that the person, my client is really going to want to expand, and that opportunity just wouldn't be in that business, it doesn't mean I can't do that wage subsidy. I need to know what skills you're going to be teaching my client that's going to allow them to grow within the labor market. Right. Preferably, we want it to be within the company that they start at, but we know that some small businesses just don't have that ability to allow them to do that growth. But what are you going to teach them in the meantime that's going to make them valuable to the next employer? So we look at how we can support that. I also have clients, job seekers, who just don't want to go back to school, who may have been out of work for a little bit, and they just need to get back into the schedule of working. So that is, we would support a wage subsidy because you're teaching them, you're working with them. So it is very individualized. What does my client need, and how can you support that process?
That's so cool. But I mean, again, just the better the relationship you have, Patricia, with that employer, the better. So businesses that are out there, if you're interested in, accessing things, call Patricia and figure out, start that relationship. So I haven't asked you a question yet from the panel up here. So I'm going to start with a few of those. Otherwise, we're going to have some ticked off attendees. So one of the questions kind of related to what we were just talking about, for the self-employment program, how can someone prove that they own 50% or a minimum 25% investment in the business if all costs were to be covered? So I guess that would be because you're going to vet them in a one-on-one conversation to figure out where they're at, right?
Yeah, they need to be a registered business. So they would bring in their business registration. As a small business owner, you're a sole proprietor, but you still have, your name is still associated with the business. They would need to show us documentation of that. And within their application, they would have that business plan on what they need the money for and where do they project themselves to be. So they put together their business plan, and we have these very open, transparent conversations. And we ask questions where we think that there needs to be questions answered.
Right. Good. Okay. So here's a question with regards to, if I already have a Métis employee on staff, can I access funding, or is it only for new hires? With COVID, we're looking for every financial support possible. So, good question, but I think you've got a plethora of, we rifled through them, but I think there was a whole pile that we didn't actually talk about.
I would say that they would be eligible because they're at risk of losing their employment. Right. It's not due to skills upgrading, it's just due to COVID. And we want to support our local businesses, whether you hire Métis or not. I'm still here for you guys in terms of connecting you with, the chambers are great. You guys already connected with them. But in terms of, do you need a job posting posted? Do you just want to vent? Do you want to tell me what you're going to be looking for in the future? Like, it doesn't mean that we have to enter this contract. We want to be here to support, because then we can go back to the table. We can go back to our funders and we can say, this is where the need is. This is where the gap is. What can we look at? How, so all that is amazing. But in terms of currently hiring somebody or have someone on payroll that you haven't accessed this programs for, I would love to connect with you. And we're going to have this very open conversation. And,
Sure.
if you're honest and say, I can't keep this person on payroll, they're at risk of losing their job, then we want to make them not lose their job.
Right, and or progress them. So in other words, we want to do some entrepreneurship where we're actually scaling. And I have this person that's here, and I need them to be here, and I need help in getting them training to get them to that next level so that they can get paid more. And so
yeah, I did one in Collingwood for a not-for-profit. We did it for a year, and within that not-for-profit, we supported the cost of a Fleming College certificate as well as a online training platform certificate to make them more valuable in the company and continue to grow that not-for-profit. They need these additional skills.
That's awesome. Sorry, I'm just rifling through here. So here's a question again from the forum. Do you reach out to the M&O to let them know of all your programs on a regular basis? For example, self-employment, or only when someone comes to you for information on all your programs?
Can you clarify? Because I do work for the M&O. So I am the M&O in a sense of representing. So whoever asked that, if you could clarify. Part of my roles as the employment developer is to be out in the community. Again, pre-COVID, we would be going to events live. And I host Métis 101s with mainstream service providers, with OW workers, ODSP workers, the school board. So our programs are out there where we try and do what we can in terms of letting them know and doing, a larger scale of this, specifically tailored to who our audience is at that point. But clients come to us, whether they know that they are Métis, that their family has citizenship, or whatever the case may be, and then otherwise it's just being in the community to try and find clients, or let them know if you are Métis, there are supports there for you.
So I would say there's probably two intakes. You're onboarding employers that have jobs that are needed, may not be right then or whatever. You may not have the right person to fit, and then you're actively onboarding Métis and people that need to be supported. So you're really like a matchmaker.
Yeah.
This is kind of like Tinder for Métis and employers, right? I mean,
in a way,
I know, I'm just teasing.
The other way, but because again, we have those clients that we're supporting through our training purchase program. They're going to graduate at some point, and we know what programs they're taking. We know what they're going to be successful in. And if an employer knows, again, it could be short term or long term, they could predict the future by, 6, 7, 8 months. Or if not, they could say, I need someone who has training in office admin. And then I can look into my database of clients and see who's taken that program. And then just do that soft introduction. I don't get involved in the interviewing. I don't get involved in the hiring. It's just, you need somebody to fill. You want them to have this level of education.
Yeah.
Here's a client that took it. If it works, great. If you interview them and your personalities and the whole karma feels amazing and the environment is good and the energy is positive, let me know and we look at how then we move forward with a contract.
Yeah. It's the same as any other situation. It's the right fit for the right person. It's not everything's going to work. It's a process that you work through. But I would say, just based on the discussions that, you probably have a fairly high success rate in placing people because it's very individualized, right? You're not going to put somebody in a position that they're not going to be successful in, right? It may be better to wait or find something else that's out there. So another question here. What does the process look like to access the wage subsidy program? What kind of information do I need to prepare? And do you have candidates that are looking for work right now?
So yes, I do have candidates that are looking for work right now. I also have those that are going to be returning to school. So we would talk about that, what your needs are at that point. The application is very simple. It's an employer application, and it asks for just your business information, your address, a void check. It asks for your tax revenue number because we just need, again, the funding is coming from the government. We need to make sure that you are a registered legal business. And then within that is a monthly work plan. So if we know that you are going to expect to have this person on board for 6 months, you would fill out 6 boxes of what their learning objectives are, because it's labor market. It all has to fall back to a training plan. So what the goals and objectives are for month 1 through month 6, and that would be it. For the client, the potential employee, they fill out an application as well, which just consists of a intake form, their resume, and that would be it for that. And then ongoing monitoring is really simple. It would be, you would provide me copies of their pay stubs, how they're paid, whether it's weekly, biweekly, or monthly. And then at the end of every month, there's a 1-page 3-box. What was the objectives? Were they met? Yes or no? And if no, why? You sign it and send it to me every month. And that would be my monitoring that I do. I wouldn't typically get involved in any conflicts. Again, we want to teach those skills to both our clients as well as the employer, that communication, conflict resolution. If it were boiling down to, extreme job performance, then we'd want to have that transparent conversation. And we want to know what the difficulties are. And it could be communication. And it's something that we'd want to tackle, and keep in mind that there are, some barriers and some reservations to some clients that we service and support based on their personal trauma, history, and experiences, that an employer may need to become aware of at some point if it's affecting it. And again, that's a conversation that we'll have. Sure. And we'll also pull in, we have supports from our healing and wellness department. So it's a whole holistic approach when we're supporting a client, and we want to prepare them for success, not re-traumatize. Yeah. So again, I don't get involved unless it's like we're not going to have them. Yeah. I've had, some successes. Most of mine are successes. I've had one that lasted 2 days, and that's just, it was a fit if the client had education already. It's just, some things just don't work, and that's no fault of nobody.
No, it just happens. So I've got a series of questions from one individual. I'm going to ask those questions, and then we'll get back to it. They touched on some things we've already sort of spoken about. So, okay. Is there a list of employers that offer Indigenous targeted job postings? Question mark. And is this available through your communications channels?
So we are in the process of redoing our website, where we will have a link to external. So if you want to hire, or if you're looking to have more diversity in your workplace, and this target area would be an Indigenous employee, or recruitment that you're looking for, then you could definitely send that to me. Okay. And then we do that. There's some organizations that have Indigenous recruitment. Those are typically your larger ones. So we look at, Hydro. They have, Indigenous recruitment, the Canadian Armed Forces, the Coast Guard. They come and present to us. We just had an amazing session with Baxter from Alliston. They came and spoke to our team. They're looking to build our diversity and inclusion, and wanted to hear, and gather how they could support the Métis Nation and their clients. So if you have anything that is specific, then we would love to hear it. But in general, if job postings come across my desk, I filter them out to all clients that would be a potential candidate.
That's awesome. And I'm hoping when our website comes online, again, we're going to have a diversity and inclusion page that we're going to be able to support that by, when you guys have things available, we can put a post up and people can tap directly into your posting. I don't think we'll post for you. We'll just redirect them back to your website at some point, which would be helpful. Okay. And again, that's a very sort of interesting way of going about, increasing the diversity in your business, which is great. Next question, same individual. Is there grants or support available to citizens looking to pursue their MBA? So I'm assuming that it's a Métis individual that's looking to get their MBA. Are there supports available?
Being their masters of business? Yeah. So if you're a citizen and you hold your citizenship within the Métis Nation of Ontario, it's called PSE, so post-secondary education, and it can get a little confusing because, again, on our website, I am from education and training, and then now we have this additional education, so PSE, post-secondary education. It is an application that you do online, and it's less client monitoring, but funds are then whatever you're able to qualify for, however they determine that. It gets sent out to them. I think don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure it closes like April 30th for this round of funding.
Okay.
And they'll do that in intakes, where mine is an ongoing. And this is separate. This isn't ISET's money. So that would be why it's citizen specific, because that
Yeah.
would be the funding mandate from the funder.
But again, I think an important thing for businesses that may have, Métis employees, they may not even know they have them, to have that information up so that people can take advantage of it. I mean, what a great opportunity for, an employer, to provide access to somebody that didn't maybe realize that they had the opportunity to get an MBA with some
Well,
funding.
you're right, Paul. It's as simple as putting a poster in your lunchroom that has, representation of various cultures. They'll know then that you are welcoming and inviting. And then they'll be more up to kind of ask why. So whether, if it's Métis specific and you're going to have a sash or Louis Riel Day, or you're going to put a poster up or something like that, whether or not it's just, again, the flag, our infinity flag behind me here, something that can be purchased and put up, that might be more welcoming and inviting. And then your employees are going to know that you're okay to listen, you want to listen, and you accept.
So that's a perfect segue into the third question for this individual. Where can I purchase a sash for my father?
So you could do that through the council now. I could definitely, so Barrie would be the Barrie South Simcoe Métis Council. You can find them on their website. If they don't have a store currently open because they became enacted kind of pre-COVID, but just pre-COVID, the Georgian Bay Métis Council as well would be a connection, and they're not far from here. Owen Sound area would be your Great Lakes Métis Council, and then towards the Muskokas is Moon River.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So, and again, that person's coming from a larger company, so I would imagine he's nodding his head, and that's good.
We have on our website, there's the M&O swag store too, but that wouldn't be necessarily that actual sash, but they have pens and cups and so on and so forth. So that could be something to check out, our swag store.
Yeah, pretty cool. So if we have time, I'm going to tell you a quick little story. So that we got a few questions in here, but we gained some time because your presentation was a little shorter than we expected. So question, can a Métis Nation member gain a job at any company and go through the program, or is it only specific companies? I think we've answered that for the most part.
Any program, any company, as long as you're a registered legal business, then we can support that.
Which is cool. Do you offer training and or resources to help me make my workplace more inclusive and welcoming to a Métis employee? Are there days of significance that I should be aware of, traditional practices that I can respectfully include in regular processes? So I think we touched on that a little bit. Kind of segues a little bit into my story too, but yeah, I know Louis Riel Day is very important in the Métis Nation. So why don't you maybe talk about that a little bit, and then to answer that question.
Well, Louis Riel and the Red River Resistance, he was a huge supporter and founding father of the need to have those Métis rights acknowledged and have us distinguished as a separate people that are still deserving. So we honor Louis Riel. We celebrate him. It's a holiday for us. We celebrate Indigenous People Day as well, and we honor Orange Shirt Day, taking into account that Métis and Inuit have been, a part of the struggles, as well as, our brothers and sisters are our First Nations people as well. So we do have stuff where we're separate from First Nations in some of our cultures, teachings and practices. So your best option would be, again, to go through the council for that knowledge, but the M&O connect with me if you'd like. And once we have our summer students, our summer youth cultural students available, they would be more than happy to do that. That's part of their job. Yeah. And we have education kits that go out to schools too. So that could be a little bit on a lower level, but if that's something that you can bring forth to your families and learn about it as well, even to your employees. So we do have those resources through the culture side, our culture, traditional way of life, through the M&O, our councils as our community representation, and then through our own summer student programs as well.
Yeah, very cool. So growing up, my next door neighbor was a doctor. He was an anesthesiologist at Scarborough General, large guy, but had a French wife and a French background. but he was a writer, and he wrote a book called about Louis Riel. His name was Dr. Charlebois. Anyways, and very well researched. I got signed copies of it, but I got like personal education from him when I was a kid, about all those kinds of things, and it was to kind of get an early introduction to Louis Riel and everything that happened along those. Wrote a lot of school projects because I had this great resource that lived next door to me. So
Well, politician elected
so
to office.
Louis Riel has been a part of my thinking in life since I was really little. So it's kind of neat. Anyway, so that's my personal take on Louis Riel. And my family's from Manitoba, so it all matches up.
Well, then you're very, very intertwined with the Red River resistance.
Exactly. I don't think there's any Métis blood though, as far as I can tell. So anyhow, all good. So there's a question here about a staff that identifies as Métis. How would I go about starting a conversation about funding available for persons already on staff? I think we've kind of already talked about that. Posting up on the board, be very inconspicuous about it, maybe lead them down the path. And I think it's probably not a bad idea. Just have an open conversation. Listen,
Totally. They like that client your employee would have to still be willing to disclose to me.
Yeah.
So if you have that relationship with them and you can be very open and transparent, everyone knows that there's struggles going on right now and that there's barriers and challenges. And it's as simple as saying, I became aware of this opportunity through the Métis Nation of Ontario. We don't make them engage with our community. We don't make them apply for citizenship. We're here when you want to learn more, if you want to learn more. But until then, we still want to support what you and your employer needs. So you would have that initial conversation. And then from there, we would then have our conversations in terms of how we can support. And it's literally that simple.
Yeah. Great. It's amazing what communication does, eh?
And if you know they're Métis, they must have already at some level been able to have that conversation with you.
Exactly.
There's obviously a comfort there where we often find that it's employers saying that they don't want to, or, we didn't know because they haven't talked about it. And that would be why, like, if you could know a lot about all other employees, but you don't know about this one and it's a shock to you, that needs to be, why was it a shock to you? And it's something that you intentionally do. It's the context of everything we need to look at. Yeah,
absolutely. Those unconscious bias or even conscious biases that we all have, regardless. I mean, I don't care who you are. There's some in there with you. So can all businesses celebrate Métis events, i.e. Orange Shirt Day, even if they aren't aware of or don't have Métis people on their staff? Is that
100%? You're an ally.
Right.
Learn why we have Orange Shirt Day, learn what the background is, why it's so important. And I think I'm extremely lucky that I was on the chamber chat when we had Orange Shirt Day on our noon chamber chat. And I got to share the background of why we honor Orange Shirt Day, red dress, the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, what the symbol of the red dress means. We love our allies, we support everybody. We want awareness across the board. Just know why you're promoting it and encouraging the conversation.
Yeah, that's an important point. And I think, it has to be consciously done. I mean, you have to have a starting point, and then it becomes something that becomes a part of the norm, but you got to start somewhere, So I still have the question from one of our guys with regards to, do you reach out to the MNO? I was hoping that maybe he would clarify the question so we could re-ask it. And then actually another one just popped up. Do we have to pay to use the service?
Absolutely not. There's no fee. We provide the funding, the soft services, the case management. There's no charge to an employee or my client in terms of they don't reimburse us for any of their post-secondary education or apprenticeship supports or bus passes that we may be able to provide. It's funding dollars. That we only issue a T4A to those who collect a training allowance, but never to the business. So you would pay them on your payroll, and then I reimburse you, whether it's through an advance at the beginning of our contract, and then at the end, or we advance throughout if we know it's a years long contract. Every 3 months I can request an advance, and and we just say, okay, we agreed to 37.5 hours a week. So for the first 3 months, it's going to be this much money. I requested advance, and at the end of that 3 months, I just again resubmit my request. There's nothing owed to the MNO for anything. No supports are ever charged.
Which is good, and a lot less paperwork doing it quarterly.
Except for fiscal end.
Yeah, well, that's true. Imagine it's a bit of, it gets a little complicated. And the last question here, is there a generational cutoff when where someone is no longer eligible to receive MNO citizenship?
That would be a citizenship question. For registry, to my knowledge, no. As long as you have the documentation and you can prove, and you know, my father has it, I have it, my grandmother had it. I don't know if anyone else above her had it. But as far as I know, there's no cutoff to say, oh, you're 5 generations from the last First Nations woman to hold status, so you don't get it.
You don't qualify, right? Yeah, which is interesting. I guess I mean it is I guess a relevant question, right? If you're 8th generation, 9th generation, and you've got one iota of blood in you, then you still qualify, which is it's a decent question, I guess.
It is for sure, and again, we honor and respect that. And our ISETS program is to those who self-identify.
Yeah.
So we would support as long as our guidelines are tabled. And now that we have self-government recognition from the federal government as a nation, we have more negotiations in some of that. So we continue to support for all of the ISETS programs, self-identifying Indigenous people, Métis.
Interesting. Well, we are 3 minutes to the end, so you know what, we had some great questions there. Good conversation. I really enjoyed this one. In closing, so I'm just going to get through a little propaganda here, but Patricia, thank you very much for coming today. We're enjoying this relationship that we're having with you guys, and we hope to make sure that blossoms and we continue to grow it and support you with many more. It seems to me that there's enough content just on your first couple of pages that we could probably have a couple more webinars on other support. So we'll work on that for sure.
That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you for this opportunity.
No, not a problem. So in closing, thank you again for joining us and for the work you do every day in your business. Thank you for the work you're already doing to flatten the curve and for your continued focus on protecting our community. Please continue to shop local, supporting neighbors, families, and friends with your intentional purchasing choices, especially through this current lockdown. Is it a lockdown? I don't know. I'm very confused, very little disappointed that we're not taking this a bit more seriously, but at any rate, hopefully this is the last one and we can get back to business as usual. Please consider taking a vaccine. I think it's important that we all do that to flatten this out completely. We still are in the middle of our Berry Takeout Challenge, sponsored by Paul Sadlin Motors, and we're giving away 2 $100 prizes every week for sharing pictures of your takeout with us. And do that on Instagram and on Facebook. $1,000 grand prize from Cool FM at the end of that. I will be giving away sort of mid-April. We're looking around the 18th is the end. So hopefully sometime, the week of the 19th, we'll be giving that away. I have to do a draw today. So we'll have our week 8 winners, I believe, coming up. And I don't have to tell you that the restaurants really need our support right now. So start ordering. Hopefully we'll have something in place for some other sectors as well coming soon. But for now, we're going to focus on this and get through it, and then we'll take a look at where our horizon is at that point. We've got a couple things that are up and coming. The Ontario 2020 budget and your business is tomorrow at 10:45 a.m. So it's a discussion with our MPPs, and we have a guest from the OCC who is very well versed in the budget and is on the advisory staff at the OCC. So we'll be taking questions about the budget and the impacts that we have here locally, regionally, and Ontario-wide. On Wednesday, the 7th, so at noon, we have our chamber networking. So that would be tomorrow as well. It's going to be a busy day. And then we have effective communication in the workplace on April 13th at 1 p.m. No big events. I think our next big thing coming up will be a golf tournament. We're still working on figuring that out, doing some planning at the moment. But for now, thank you for today, and enjoy the rest of your week. And I hope to see some of our other stuff. You have something
I
to
just
say?
want to add one thing really, really short, guys. We are able to look at how we could fund wage subsidies for remote work as long as those goals and objectives can be met. So the work can be done off location as well.
Oh, okay. Good, a good additional piece there. We will talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.